Welcome to the Alcohol Reset, the podcast that helps you reset your habits, health, and relationship with alcohol without judgment or extremes. If you're looking to cut back, take a break, or just understand how drinking can affect your body and mind, you're in the right place. Each episode brings you science-backed insights on neuroscience, nutrition, and habit change to help you feel better, sleep deeper, and take control on your terms. I'm Mike Hardenbrook, best-selling author, neuroscience enthusiast, and habit change expert. I've helped thousands through my book and podcast to rethink their drinking, and now I'm here to help you do the same. Let's get started. All right, everybody, welcome back. We're going to do a little dive today on something that I found really fascinating. I had a chance to talk with Dr. Jason Kilmer, and he's a professor and researcher over at the University of Washington. And, he really kind of opened my eyes to a new way of thinking about why we drink. So the core question that we're going to kind of dig into today is, when we find ourselves wanting a drink, in a social setting, is it the alcohol itself that's doing all the work, making us feel relaxed or, sociable or confident? Or could it be something else? For so long, we just kind of assume, well, alcohol has these biological effects. We take a few sips, our nerves calm down. Maybe we have another drink and conversation flows a little bit easier. But Dr. Kilmer's research is really interesting because it kind of throws a wrench into that. He actually led a study that offers some really surprising insights. And so what I want to do today is really understand, what his work reveals about why we might feel the urge to drink in social situations. And maybe even more importantly, what can that understanding do for us if we're looking at, our relationship with alcohol? Maybe changing it a little bit. And one thing that really struck me in my conversation with Dr. Kilmer was, and this actually goes all the way back to his early work in the late 80s, was his introduction to harm reduction. And for those of you who might not be familiar with this term, harm reduction is really about those practical strategies that we can use to minimize the negative consequences of drinking. Rather than just, say, hey, just abstain. And so this whole approach really led him to become curious about why college students were drinking in the first place, not just how much. And that's where he started exploring, this idea of social expectation, which I think is something that a lot of us can relate to, that it's just kind of a given that alcohol is a must-have for socializing. And that brings us to, really kind of the core of Dr. Kilmer's study, this bar lab experiment. Now, this was something that was actually developed by his mentor, Dr. Alan Marlett, at the University of Washington's Behavioral Alcohol Research Laboratory. And, the whole idea behind this was to really try to separate the real pharmacological effects of alcohol from the psychological expectations that we have. And the way they did this was really ingenious. I mean, they actually went to great lengths to create a very realistic bar-like environment right in the lab, so they could observe how people behaved under different conditions, but not everybody was actually consuming the same thing. And so this is where the balanced placebo design comes in. And it's really just a clever way to really try to control for these expectations. So they had 4 different groups of participants, all adults over 21, who, said that they were regular drinkers. And the really crucial element here is what they were told they were drinking versus what they were actually drinking. So the first group was told they were getting alcohol, and they actually did. So this is kind of your baseline comparison. But the second group, this is where things get really interesting. They were told they were drinking alcohol, and they might have even tasted something that mimicked alcohol, but it was actually a non-alcoholic drink. Think of it like a placebo, like a sugar pill. But, in this case, it's designed to, look and even taste a little bit like a real alcoholic beverage. And then the third group was pretty straightforward. They were told they were getting a non-alcoholic drink, and that's what they got. But the fourth group, this is where things get really kind of mind-bending. They were told they were getting a non-alcoholic drink. So they had no expectation of, feeling any effects from alcohol, but secretly they were given alcohol. And so this design allowed the researchers to really compare, what happens when people actually consume alcohol versus when they just believe they have. And the results were pretty stunning. The group that believed they drank alcohol, even though they hadn't, they started exhibiting all the classic social drinking behaviors. People got louder, more talkative, more animated, even a little flirtatious, just like you might see, in a real bar. But here's what's even more remarkable. Some of them actually reported feeling a buzz and even said that they felt like they were unfit to drive. It's like their bodies and minds were actually reacting as if they had consumed alcohol, even though they hadn't. But now let's contrast that with the fourth group, the ones that actually did drink alcohol, but didn't know it. They showed almost none of those social behaviors. Instead, they reported feeling tired, sluggish, and, attributing it to other things like having a long day or maybe not sleeping well, So the people that actually had alcohol weren't acting drunk because they didn't expect to be. And the people that had nothing were acting like they'd had a few drinks simply because they believed they did. So the real takeaway here, and this is, what I think is so important for us, is that those social effects that we so often think are because of alcohol. They really appear to be driven by our expectations, by the placebo effect of believing that we're drinking, rather than the direct effects of alcohol itself. So let's break this down. Let's think about what this means for all of us. If our goal is to, have a drink and feel more confident in a social setting, what this research is suggesting is that confidence isn't coming from the alcohol. It's something that we already have inside of us. And the drink is just acting as a kind of psychological permission slip. It's like we're giving the drink credit for something that we already possess. And the same thing goes for sociability. That desire to connect and engage. It's likely coming from our own mindset. And that intention to be social, not from the drink in our hand. And what about that feeling of relaxation? That a lot of people seek out when they drink. Is the alcohol truly relaxing us? Or are we just anticipating that relaxation because we've learned to associate drinking with unwinding? And so if these desired social experiences, the confidence, the sociability, the relaxation, if they're so heavily influenced by our expectations, what does that mean for someone who's thinking about maybe cutting back or stopping drinking altogether? Well, I think it's really empowering because it means that reducing or stopping drinking. It doesn't mean that we're going to automatically lose those enjoyable social experiences. We already have the capacity for those things inside of us, independent of alcohol. So it's not about alcohol giving us something we don't have. It's really about our beliefs around alcohol, shaping our experiences. So based on Dr. Kilmer's research, what are some practical things that we can do to actually apply this understanding to our own relationship with alcohol? I think one of the first things that we can do, and this is so important, is to challenge our assumptions. The next time we're in a social situation and we feel that urge to have a drink, to feel more comfortable, just pause for a moment and ask ourselves, do I really need this drink to enjoy myself? Can I connect with others without it? What evidence do I actually have that says I can't be social or have fun without alcohol? Could it be that I want this drink more out of habit or expectation than a real need? I think consciously questioning that automatic connection between alcohol and social ease is so important. And what else can we do? Well, Dr. Kilmer's research has also shown that alternating drinks can be a really effective strategy. Oftentimes, it's really just the physical act of holding a drink and participating in that social ritual. That's what's important. So consider actively switching back and forth between alcoholic and non-alcoholic beverages, or explore those, really amazing non-alcoholic options that are out there these days. Things that look and even taste similar to what we might normally drink. This can help to, satisfy that social cue for both ourselves and the people around us without actually having to consume the alcohol. It's a really good way to kind of experiment with those expectations, both internally and externally. Another helpful tip is to really slow down and pay attention to how we're actually drinking. Things like the size of the glass, whether or not it's filled with ice, or if the drink is carbonated. All these little things can actually influence how quickly we drink and our overall consumption. And by being more mindful of these aspects, we can often naturally drink less without feeling deprived. It's about bringing awareness to the very act of drinking. And maybe most importantly, Dr. Kilmer's findings show that we absolutely can have fun and be social without relying on alcohol. Since so much of what we perceive as the benefit is actually psychological, we could experiment with, going out sober, or intentionally drinking less in social situations and see what happens. We might be surprised to find that, we can still enjoy ourselves, maybe even more so because we're more present and engaged. So, the big takeaway here is that alcohol is not the magic bullet for social interaction. Our own expectations play a much bigger role than we realize. And if we're thinking about drinking more mindfully, cutting back, or even stopping, this research offers a really hopeful and empowering perspective because it's not about feeling like we're missing out by not drinking. It's about recognizing that we already have everything we need inside of us to have fun, to be sociable, and to feel confident. So I'll leave you with this. How have your own expectations around alcohol shaped your social experiences? And what would be possible if you started to shift those expectations, even just a little bit? And if you want to hear more from Dr. Kilmer, I had a great conversation with him on Journey to Sunnyside. So check that out. That's a wrap for today's episode. If you got something out of this, do me a quick favor, leave a rating and review on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. It helps keep the show going and would mean the world to me. Got ideas, comments, or questions? Shoot me an email at mike@trycloud9.com. I'd love to hear from you. And if you're looking for extra support, check out Cloud9, makers of Daily Restore, a once-a-day supplement to support your body from alcohol's effects, and Rise and Unwind AM/PM, a 24-hour combo to curb cravings, balance mood, and improve sleep when taking a break. Go to trycloud9.com and use the code PODCAST to save 15% on your next order. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.